I'm Tom, I'm invested in the Cosmere, and we are here at Dragonsteel Nexus 2025, and I am here with Andrew Fischer from the Cosmere RPG team.
Hello.
Andrew, what do you do for the Cosmere RPG?
So I was the lead designer. I kind of helped get the system started and oversaw the handbook design on the Stormlight handbook and the Mistborn handbook. And now Lydia, who was on the design team for those, is now taking over as lead designer as I move over to Plotweaver, which is kind of our implementation of the whole RPG system in a broader context. So Lydia is our lead designer kind of going forward into projects beyond, but I helped with those first two books.
Awesome. So with Stormlight now out and Mistborn coming just around the corner, what were some of the biggest takeaways from the Stormlight system that when the team started to implement Mistborn, that really changed your approach?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. It's tricky because the nature of RPG development is that we started work on Mistborn so long ago, so long before Stormlight came out, right, hit the shelves. And we're just wrapping up the books now. We're in kind of final QA. So we have a bit of time to integrate and catch anything coming from the release of Stormlight. But, we've been working on Mistborn here for the last, year to 2 years, and we were concepting it from the very get-go. So we're not able to take too many lessons learned. It's not like, it's not like we release Stormlight, get to unpack all those lessons and then get started on Mistborn. We have to dive into that a lot earlier. That being said, we have taken away a lot of good lessons as to how people are processing it, just from what wordings are clicking with people. Obviously, our game has a long design legacy coming from, inspirations from D20 systems and other systems, and so people carry over different assumptions and kind of preferences from those systems, and that can change how they interpret our rules. And so we, Laura, our editor, can look at how people are interpreting something and kind of think about how we're wording things in our rules to better interpret that. A couple other takeaways are we're really trying to hone in on our NPC and adversary design on Mistborn. The design team kind of breaks into specialties. We have this really talented designer, Imogen, on our adversary design, and she's doing a really good job just kind of honing them down to their essential elements. We try to keep in the system our NPCs fairly parallel with PCs. All characters are kind of a similar entity. There's not like a disparity where they're kind of two different types of mechanical entity. That makes them complicated, which can make it harder for the GM to process. So we've been looking at ways of streamlining that and just getting them down to their essential elements and making them easier for the GM to use.
Cool. So you actually have a background working with massive IPs. You've worked with Star Wars, with Fallout. How does the Cosmere stack up in terms of opportunity to convert into a game system?
Well, there's ups and downs. It's a mixed bag, right? Ultimately, Cosmere is a fantastic place to work in, obviously, right? Not only is it so rich and creative and varied, which I love as a designer, but Brandon's underlying logic to the Cosmere kind of helps us when we're creating the fundamentals of the system to know that we can prepare for future settings. If we can kind of distill the mechanical identity of kind of those atomic elements of how Brandon constructs his magic systems, we can know, okay, when he builds some new magic system that works in some way we didn't even imagine, we know that our mechanical atomic elements can kind of apply to that. So in that way, pretty useful. There are some challenges though. One thing that people always assume is going to be easy about the Cosmere for turning it into an RPG, but that actually can be kind of challenging, is how systematized some of his settings are.
Sure.
From ideals, having these very clear kind of almost levels, to the very specific physics of allomancy. These have these systems, and so that sounds great, right? But when you start diving into mechanics, each of these systems, not too bad if you were making a board game in isolation of one setting. it's pretty easy to just map one-to-one with what a setting handles, but we're handling every setting. And so we have to create a system with enough granularity that it can map ideals as these big swaths of power that are really based on like introspection, but also like the really granular kind of skill-based push and pull of things like allomancy to like storing traits like feruchemy, and our system needs to handle it all. And so it gets a little hard when you have all these different, each system is very systematized, but then you have all these different systems that all need to talk to each other. And you know, in Brandon's storytelling, it can be messy and complex and interesting and have all these emergent interactions and things, but then mechanically we need to make it all make sense and be easy to understand. And so what sounds like it might be make the Cosmere easy can actually make it a little harder. How it stacks up to settings like Star Wars, for example, I think Star Wars is probably the closest analogy. Because they're both these kind of expansive settings with lots of different places to go. I'd say one thing I'd say in that comparison is just that the Cosmere is way more. Star Wars has had way more games made in it already. You know, when we set out to make the Star Wars RPG, we were, you know, depending on how you count it, like the 5th Star Wars RPG that it has existed, right? Here, you know, like we've had like the Mistborn adventure game and things, but like we are treading all sorts of new ground, and that's kind of freeing and exciting. You don't have this baggage of like, oh, these are all the ways you did it. It's been done before. Do you copy that? Do you do something completely different just to do something different? And you know, you're constantly comparing yourself to what's come before. And here we can just focus on the story and the IP and just make whatever speaks to us, which is kind of freeing compared to some of those other IPs.
Was there anything that, when you put together the vision of the Plot Weaver system, was there any mechanic or system that you wanted to incorporate into Plot Weaver that just didn't fit the Cosmere setting?
Yeah, well, my short answer is no, because we built Plot Weaver for Cosmere. So in many ways, we were tailor-making this system to model the Cosmere how we wanted it to. However, I think if I was to talk about parts of the system that maybe Plot Weaver handling settings even beyond the Cosmere might feel more freeing, it can often be like we resolve a lot of our invested arts with skills, and this kind of skill-based approach allows players to just be creative about how they use it, and then the GM can resolve it with a skill test, and we give them kind of these tools to do so. That's incredibly freeing and flexible and lets Magic be very creative, which works well for many of the Cosmere things, especially when you see like all the creative uses of allomancy. You know, these very specific powers, like you can only push on metal, but people apply it in all these creative ways. So works really well to serve that. However, you can push on metal is also incredibly specific. And so we have to spend all this time telling you exactly where the walls to your creativity end so that you feel like you're actually accurately representing the physics of the setting. So I'd say there's no mechanic I wish I could do that we didn't.
Sure.
But like sometimes I wish I could be a little more free in just saying like, you know, just giving you this power and just letting you do whatever you want with it. In that way, like, I speak about allomancies because we're working on Mistborn, but in that way, surges are almost more freeing because like gravitation is so broad compared to you can just push on metal or whatever.
Right.
You know.
And I mean, that's the benefit of it being a role-playing game, is it really is down to your table and what you want to do. So like, if you want to stretch the rules a little bit, there's always flexibility in all of those things.
Totally. And like, that's why we went with this skill-based magic, is we wanted to build in that flexibility, because you know, as soon as Brandon writes another book about in any given established magic system, he will introduce new ways to use a power that are creative and use like emergent interactions of physics or something. And so like if we only write the rules to specifically cover what we see in the books,
right,
it'll be immediately obsolete, right? So we want to give people the tools to be creative with stuff.
Amazing. So Mistborn is coming soon. What tips do you have for game masters who have parties adventuring on Roshar and maybe want to bring that action into the next setting?
Well, we do have a small section with tips. Ultimately, both Roshar in the Stormlight handbook and Scadrial in the Mistborn handbook are designed to stand on their own. You can just pick up that book and just play on Scadrial and never have to leave, or play on Roshar and never have to leave. And also in the eras we're depicting there's not a lot of...
timelines get weird.
Yeah, I mean, there's a little, right? But like not a ton, like not stuff that we've seen in some of the other books out in the Cosmere where we get a lot more overlap. So because of that, we're not yet giving robust rules for mashing them together, but they're all compatible.
Sure.
So, obviously go and check out the small section we give on exactly how we recommend combining these two things. And your timeline's your timeline. You can have your the Scadrial show up on Roshar or vice versa.
Exactly.
And we give you the mechanical tools to kind of resolve that. My big tip kind of gets back to that comment I made about the difference in surges and metallic arts. So we mechanically balance them with a few different things like opportunity cost and other things as you level up your characters. But surges, just as an invested art, are a lot more flexible than a lot of allomancies and feruchemies, which are very specific. And so because of that, there's kind of a difference in kind of flexibility of the characters. So just kind of keep that in mind if you are having your Scadrians and your Rosharans partying together, of making sure that your allomancers, especially feruchemists, with most everything being internal, don't have this problem as much, but make sure your allomancers have opportunities to kind of utilize their powers because they're just more specific compared to the Rosharans.
Cool. Looking to the future, I'm very curious to learn what the next setting's going to be, but
I'm going to leave that. I think you're talking to Johnny, right?
Yeah.
So I'm gonna leave that to Johnny to talk about.
Sure.
We shared in the Kickstarter a couple of our plans for the settings, and you can look at Brandon's lineup and start to guess about where we want to go next.
Sure.
But exact timing on them is something we coordinate with Brandon, and so. Johnny, I'm the designer. Johnny will be able to. Johnny will know more.
I'm just from a personal preference.
Yeah.
Nexus 2024, Warbreaker did get the loudest cheer at the live.
That comes up in our meetings. It's like we were like, Nalthus really.
Yeah, we're recording this on day one, which is Thursday. It is Thursday, right?
Yes.
It's been a blur. And the big panel is not until Saturday.
Saturday morning,
so,
yeah.
I am bailing on my booth for an hour and a half to go and watch that.
Sweet.
But I'm very excited to hear what's coming up next. From the team's perspective, though, when you are starting to scale this out and looking into books and areas of the Cosmere that we either have very little information on or that there's going to be this information coming in the future, how do you prep the team to be successful in that kind of environment?
Yeah, there's a lot to that, right? That's my work on Star Wars is one of the reasons Johnny reached out to me about this project is because, on Star Wars, we had a similar problem as we were making stuff as stuff was coming out and we're in this big setting. So we spent a lot of work from the get-go to try to do that. So there's a lot of different steps from designing our systems in kind of this modular tiered way where there's kind of more core systems and then, the kind of developed systems, and then you have the content. And we kind of choose which things go where based on what we're going to sub out in a given setting. We also designed some of the core systems to be flexible to be able to handle this. So like a very basic example is just the investiture stat. We could look at ways to very specifically model each of the magic systems, but then we have to whitelist every single one and talk about how every single one talks to each other. So we instead designed it more as this fundamental singular stat that all settings share, and this gives us this tool to make all of these kind of talk to each other more easily. Stuff like that helps us. Other preparation we do is we do a lot of, like, right now we're actually been in this big phase of brainstorming for wider Cosmere stuff, where we kind of talk about each system and what we're modeling and how we're kind of carving out parts of the system so that we're kind of creating these like holders that will later fit the systems when we get more specifics. And then the last and simple answer is we work with Brandon.
Yeah, of course.
And so he kind of tells us, okay, I have plans here, not here, like don't touch this, specifics on this. And so the Dragonsteel team is like integral to this process. We could not do the work we're doing to block this out without being able to kind of work with them to know how to handle certain things. You know,
is that level of connection with the Dragonsteel team at the same level or different than what you saw with Star Wars and Fallout?
Every licensor is different, and so Dragonsteel's been really awesome to work with. Like when we started on the RPG, we got to sit down with Brandon. He talked about his preferences, his expectations. He's laid out a lot of kind of his vision for this. And so just having that direct line to be able to kind of work with him early on was super valuable. And, you know, a lot of our questions get, Karen Ulstrom is fantastic, and then, you know, she brings certain questions to Brandon, and so the two of them, obviously, there's a bunch of other folks like Isaac and everybody else on the Dragonsteel team who all help us in different elements of the project, but being able to work with them directly is pretty, compared to a lot of other bigger licensors I've worked with, not something I've gotten to do as much before. When you're working with a larger licensor, often you're working through like a licensing department who, you know, like Star Wars, as the example I keep coming back to, is, you know, they were working on the sequel movies when I was working with Star Wars. So like some tabletop RPG,
right,
not the same
not
as when J.J. Abrams wants an answer, right? And so like, you know, we didn't have a direct line to just talk to the source on anything. So in that way, Dragonsteel has just been a phenomenal partner for from a license perspective.
Awesome. So from a personal perspective, if you could wave a magic wand and pick where you're going next in terms of Cosmere settings, what's your sort of, what are you looking forward to the most in working on?
Is this as me as a player or as me as a designer?
Ooh, give me both.
Okay, player is probably, I want to do Tress. I think pirate ships are awesome, and like with the Spore Sea and everything, it's just rad. So that's, as a player, I want to go there. As a designer, you know, spores are cool, but as a designer, I know exactly how I want to do Aeons in the system, and so I'd love to go, like, I want to work on Cell next, and I mean, obviously Cell has way more than Aeons, but
sure,
like, Aeons specifically with how we design the combat system and things, like, I just have a very specific vision for what they look like, and so I want them to exist.
Awesome. What's your Cosmere RPG player? At the booth this year, I've got a map of Roshar, and I'm doing kind of like a travel map style, like when you go to a national park and you put the pin in where you're from.
Oh, cool.
I want people to put the pin in where their Cosmere RPG character is from. So where's your Cosmere RPG character from for the Rosharan setting?
For Roshar. Well, that's a good question. I don't know why, but I feel like Thalena.
Yeah, got some.
Maybe it's the eyebrows.
Yeah. I've seen some excellent cosplay of the super long eyebrows. I absolutely love it.
I say that, but I don't know. I might find like all the like mercantilism insufferable. I think it's just because like I like Risen, and like so I have, when I think about, you know, like heard different chapters and everything that has happened, I kind of associate that with Thelena. She was in Thelena, right?
Yeah,
when she was,
she's down, yeah.
That's right, yeah, because she was. Yeah, so I think that might be why it immediately jumped to my head, but I don't know if it speaks to my personality in actuality.
Do you have a Radiant Order in mind you stick to?
So it's the boring answer, but like when we've done all when we do the surveys and everything, I always get Windrunner.
Oh, interesting.
So, yeah.
Yeah. I think personally, I am going to try. I have not played. I'm excited to play at the Epic later on. I grabbed a player slot because I am a forever GM, and I needed to break that mold. And I'm taking the opportunity to be a player. I'm doing Stoneward for that, but for my first campaign, I am definitely going no Radiant Order. I am
just heroic.
Full heroic path.
Awesome.
I absolutely love it.
Well, go check out the rewards chapter. That's going to be your friend because that's one of the big balancing mechanisms. Is that heroic characters aren't going to have to spend rewards and goals and rewards gaining their ideals. Instead, you can get shard blades or powerful people to help you and things. So that rewards chapter is going to be your friend.
There we go. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me. Anything for people to check out at Nexus while they're here that Brotherwise is putting on?
Oh yeah, well I mean, come by the Brotherwise booth. We're right at the entrance to the gaming area. You can check out people playing the game. We have got big old pile of starter boxes out there and everything, so come check out the game. If you want to see a really epic event, Friday night we're running the Stormlight Epic. That's like...
I will be here. I will be not shooting the whole thing.
Do you know how many players we have?
I think 400 was the last count that I heard.
It's going to be awesome. It was cool. It has been... They've done an awesome job with that event, so I'm excited to see it this year.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.